Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise today to talk about the fiscal cliff that this country is facing and is coming upon us on January 1st. As my colleagues have been pointing out, Congress must act soon to take on the enormous expiring tax provisions in the sequester. And I believe President Obama needs to supply the leadership in those efforts. If he doesn't, we know that taxes are going to go up on all Americans. We know that the economy is going to be thrown back into a recession, and we know that unemployment will return to even higher rates than we have right now. Our recovery from the last recession has been far too sluggish. We see that all across the country, and it's left too many Americans still out of work. Today, our economy has created 9 million fewer jobs than we were promised under the President's own stimulus plan. Our economy has rebounded far more slowly than it has following previous recessions. We simply cannot, as a nation, afford another recession right now. It'd be especially tragic if there was a recession caused by a failure of leadership coming out of the White House. But that's what we're trying to avoid, and we have a very limited amount of time to do it. As chairman of the Republican Policy Committee, I've come out with a policy paper called On the Fiscal Cliff. Entitlement reform is key, because what we see is that no amount of tax revenue will fix entitlement spending when you look at the history of the United States. Over the last 40 years, the average amount of tax revenue is a little over 18% of the gross national product. The highest ever was a little over 20% of the gross national product, but yet, when we take a look at the tidal waves coming at us of Social Security and Medicare, that unless we deal with those two tidal waves, we're going to significantly have problems long term, and that message to the markets is going to be one that is quite destabilizing. Tax increases don't solve the spending problem. If we do what the President requests, which is raising tax rates on people over $200,000 a year of income, well, in terms of spending for next year, that would pay for about 6.8 days. If we did it at the other level of over $1 million of income, which some have suggested, it would only pay for 4 days of spending. Well, I am very concerned about what I call the fiscal cliff. Yesterday, Politico reported that some Democrats want to start calling it the fiscal slope. It's time for Democrats in Washington to stop searching for better sound bites and start looking for solutions. President Obama has said repeatedly that he wants to take a balanced approach. And this balanced approach should govern how we deal with other issues as well, and how Democrats work with Republicans in the Senate. Given the challenges that we face, it's unfortunate that some of the President's closest allies here in the Senate are pushing the exact opposite approach. The Majority Leader and some members of his party have now proposed that what would be an unprecedented power grab that will forever change this chamber's rules. They'll make it easier for the political majority to silence those who disagree with them, and even harder to find common ground. Now, I'm speaking, of course, about the Democratic plan to change the rules of the Senate to drastically limit the use of the filibuster. The Majority Leader would take, I believe, a dangerous step toward abolishing the rights of the political minority and restricting the right to free and open debate. They seem to want to break the rules to change the rules. And I believe it's fundamentally wrong to break the rules in order to change the rules. This would be a terrible mistake and an irresponsible abuse of power. The rules of the Senate ensure a balanced approach to debating important matters, such as the fiscal crisis. And among these rules, filibuster is critically important. The filibuster was created so that competing groups of senators would actually have to work together to find responsible solutions, not solutions based on one political ideology or the other. Back when he was a senator, President Obama understood the need for rules to protect the rights of political minorities. In 2005, then Senator Obama said, quote, "If the majority chooses to end the filibuster, if they choose to change the rules and put an end to democratic debate," he said, "then the fighting and bitterness and the gridlock will only get worse." Another former senator, Madam President, was Vice President Biden, currently the President of the Senate, and he agreed. He said, "At its core, the filibuster is not about stopping a nominee or a bill. it's about compromise and moderation. At the time, in 2005, some Republicans wanted to vote on well-qualified judges despite the Democrats' insistence not to. Well, they felt that we needed to change the Senate rules to get these votes. Back then, Democrats called this the nuclear option. That's because of the damage it would do to the balance and compromise in Washington. So today, some of those same Democrat senators are preparing to use this nuclear option themselves. Any time that one party or group is frustrated with the Senate's inefficiency, there are always calls to change the rules. The frustration is natural, but it's also intentional. Our nation's founding fathers purposely made the pace of the Senate deliberate. They wanted to make sure that there was free debate on important subjects. That's what's happened now for more than 200 years. Way back 1789, the very first session of the first Congress, senators used the rules to slow down one of the first votes that this body ever took. Naturally, there were complaints at the time about the delay. Father of our Constitution, James Madison, explained the importance of the rules that allow the brakes to be applied to policymaking. He wrote, "If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary." Well, angels have always been in very short supply in Washington, so voters must keep an eye on our government officials and hold them responsible. Those officials must also keep close eye on each other. At times, they must be able to stop each other from doing harm. Now, restricting the right to debate would seriously undermine the ability of senators to keep that watchful eye. It will lead to more bickering, more bad blood, and more bills being written by one party behind closed doors. There will be less transparency, less consideration of the unintended consequences in bills, and less open discussion for the American people to see. The filibuster is not just about stopping bad ideas. More often, it's about amending bills to make them better. It's about taking the time to have the reasoned discussion that the founders knew that we should be having. It's about maintaining the balanced approach that the President is calling for in these important talks on the fiscal cliff. It's about giving members of the minority and the people that they represent a chance to offer their solutions. Instead of allowing that measured approach, the founders intended that what we're seeing is a majority leader who has already done an awful lot to limit debate. He's already restricted the rights of the minority senators and the people they represent. He's bypassed committees at an extraordinary pace, and he's made unprecedented use of the parliamentary trick known as filling the tree. Senator Reid has filled this amendment tree 67 times since he's been majority leader. That's more than twice as often as the four previous majority leaders combined. So now the majority leader wants to cut off debate and abolish the filibuster. And he wants to change the rules by breaking the rules. He should set the precedent that he would set the precedent that just 51 senators could band together to change any rule of the Senate at any time. Currently, it takes 67 votes to change the rules of the Senate. In January, it might be filibusters on motions to proceed. Then, when the majority gets impatient on something else, it might change the rules again. President Obama recognized in 2005 the damage that this kind of chipping away at minority rights would do to prospects for compromise. If Senate Democrats succeed now, they will destroy for temporary political gain and any hope of achieving a truly balanced solution to the challenges that we face as a nation. Our political system functions on majority rule, but with strong minority rights. That's true when the minority is outvoted 51-49 or 99-1. Democracy is not winner take all. The right to debate is not a luxury for the majority to hand out. It is essential to our system of government. Majorities are temporary. Being forced to listen to someone give an opinion you disagree with can be exasperating, but as a country, it does us more good than harm. John Adams, way back, wrote on the need for minorities to have the ability to stop the majority in the legislature. He said, and I quote, "Every member," he said, "must possess it." And he can never be secure that himself and his constituents shall not be sacrificed by all the rest. Well, that was centuries ago. 16 years ago, Senator Robert Byrd spoke to the newly elected members of the Senate about the history of this body. He said that, quote, "As long as the Senate retains the power to amend and the power of unlimited debate, the liberties of the people will be secure." Well, through this excessive use of filling the tree, the current majority leader has gone a long way toward gutting the power to amend. The proposals he's now made to do away with the power of unlimited debate would be even do greater harm to the liberties of the people. Many senators here today were not around 16 years ago to hear that speech by Senator Byrd. But I hope that all of us on both sides of the aisle take his warning to heart. If members on the other side of the aisle are frustrated with how the Senate is being run, look at how the majority leader has set the calendar and cut off amendments. Don't take this terrible and irresponsible step. We aren't arguing about just the rights of the senators to speak, or we aren't just talking about maintaining rules for their own sake, or even the terrible precedent that would be set under the majority leader's proposal. We are talking about the rights of the people that we represent, the right to be heard in the United States Senate. The senators who are so eager to change our rules by breaking the rules should not be so eager to take away the rights of the American people that those rules were designed to protect. The cost is simply too high. We have too much important work to do here in the Senate. We should be focused on doing all we can to avoid the fiscal cliff, to grow our economy, and to create the jobs that the American people need and deserve. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.